Hey everybody, GI from NTX Vinyl coming at you with another quick video. This is a series I try to do pretty regularly called Talking About Records. So this week, this is not one I'd planned on, honestly, but sometimes you just gotta roll with it. About a week ago, I came across a really unique collection of vintage LPs. If you've been following the feed on any of my channels, I've teased it a bunch. Mainly just because I was super excited to come across it. Showed a bunch of photos. And so I decided to do a video about this and kind of tell the story of this collection because I've had so many questions about where it came from, why in the world someone would want to sell these types of LPs, how it landed in my lap, and most importantly, what am I going to do with it, right? So I don't have the answers to all of that yet, but I can definitely tell the story. It's about 3,000 records is what I came across. It ranges from the I would say the late 60s through the early 90s. So a wide range, almost 100% rock. So tons of classic rock as you'd expect, but a ton of new wave, some punk, metal. Really runs the gamut. The guy had really good taste, so there's not a lot of filler. It was meticulously picked and curated over the course number of years. So. But let me back up. So, first of all, how did I come across this, right? That's the biggest question I get. Like, how did you find this? And that really varies. If you're digging for records, used records and collections, you can go to places like, Craigslist and estate sales and, obviously, Facebook Marketplace these days, very, very popular. And I do that too. Like, I look around all the time, always have my eyes peeled, but one of the advantages of owning a record shop is that sometimes things come to you. And that's the case with this one. So I did not have to go seek this one out, discover it on my own. The guy who owned this collection came to me and he said, I'm looking to get rid of this collection. It's something that, again, he had curated for years and years. So this wasn't a hand-me-down collection. A lot of times when records come up for sale, collections big or small, it's it was passed down, maybe someone passed away and now children or relatives are left with a collection of records and they don't really know what to do with them, and so that's typically when they would go to a record store. So that wasn't this scenario, but it was kind of similar. The guy was older and he had collected these and he loved them, but he knew at a certain point he was going to have to pass them on. Didn't want to get stuck with them, or God forbid something happened to him and then they just end up in the trash or end up getting sold, with the rest of his estate or whatever it be. So he was smart and he kind of is forward thinking. This guy in particular was a collector of a lot of things, not just music, vinyl, but CDs and tapes, all kinds of other stuff, but also toys and just memorabilia. So lots of different collections. So again, thinking big picture, this was just one of his collections that he was trying to figure out, what am I going to do with this in the long term? So he approached me and was curious if I was interested. Of course, I said, yeah, I'd love to take a look. Most of the time when I'm dealing with people, whether they come to me or whether, maybe I found them somehow, it's kind of hard to extract information because a lot of times they don't know what they have. They don't know, if their records are valuable or rare or even collectible, or if anybody would ever want them. That wasn't the case for this guy. Like, he knew what he had. Again, this is stuff that he all chose. So this was in the Dallas area where I'm based, where my shop is based. So I didn't have to go far, which was amazing. And he had told me that he shopped at Sound Warehouse, which was a very popular chain, record and CD store throughout the 80s and 90s. He said he would go to Sound Warehouse every Friday night for about 20 years, and he would buy records only. He had a lot of CDs and stuff too, but primarily records. And then he said once he moved once he moved in a different area, in a different location in the area, and once Sound Warehouse eventually went out of business, then he changed and he was going to Half Price Books, the flagship store down near Dallas. And that's then when he was setting up for 20 years of that as well. So if you do the math, you're looking at 30, 40 years here of, once a week he was telling me he would go and buy a couple records. So again, this was stuff that he cherry picked himself and added to his collection. That's kind of the main difference in this collection that I'm seeing, which I'm still in the process of going through, versus, again, hand-me-down records or records that were accumulated in a very different way. So this is all hand-picked, hand-selected stuff, which shows. And again, based on his taste, which is really great, because I could have landed on a collection like this, and it could have been someone who, collected classical or big band or something like that, and it's like that's not what I would have been looking for. But it just so happened that his taste aligned perfectly with my taste, and I think a lot of yours as well, based on the feedback I'm seeing. So the fact that he reached out to me was amazing. And he was very knowledgeable about what he had in regards to just the music and the artist. So when I was able to ask him, because the first question I asked is, hey, so can you give me some examples of the types of artists? Because he said it was initially he said mostly classic rock, and I said, great. Well, is there any of the staples? So what are the staples, right? So immediately when someone says classic rock to me, I'm like, hey, can you tell me if you have any Pink Floyd, Beatles, Queen, Grateful Dead, David Bowie, right? Those types of things, like kind of the top tier, Jimi Hendrix, like whatever. And he came back pretty quickly. He's like, yeah, I've got a bunch of those. And he named a few titles that he had. I'm like, okay, cool. So again, just kind of verifying that, it's the type of stuff I'm looking for, because classic rock can mean a lot of things. You could have come back and said, no, it's mostly, Doobie Brothers and the Eagles and stuff like that, which, hey, great albums, great artists. But from a collectability standpoint, those are much more common LPs versus the more top tier stuff, which can also be common but very collectible because of the artist I named. So it was great that he was very open to communication with me. The other thing that he said right off the bat, which I actually liked, because it told me a lot about kind of how he was looking at this, was he immediately said, hey, I'm looking to sell this collection. It's 2,500 or 3,000 records, and I want to sell it all. No cherry picking at all. That's a big deal. And I of course told him, hey, that's great. I have no problem buying collections, because he's smart enough to know that, hey, if he's going to let someone cherry pick this, someone's going to come in, myself included, and pick out the cream of the crop. Instead of taking all 3,000 of those records, maybe you just pick out 100 or a couple hundred or whatever, pay a premium for those, but then he's stuck with the other 2,000 or whatever it be, and that's not what he needed. He needed to clear this out. He needs the space. He needed to be rid of this, so that he could clear it off his mind. And again, lots of collections he's got to deal with, so this is one of many. And that's a pretty common, well, I tell you about it. If someone knows what they're doing, it's pretty common, but it's a question I ask all the time. When I first come across a collection, big or small, I don't care if it's one crate or a whole room full of records, one of my first questions after I get past talking about the genres and maybe some example artists is like, how do you want to get rid of this? Are you willing to, let it be pieced out, or is it all or none? And everyone's different, but I would say most of the time, again, if people are looking to clear out their closets or a spare room, they want to get rid of all this stuff, is the traditional way that I see it. But it's gone the other way too. Sometimes people are just like, hey, I just want to thin it out, which is fine too. But in this case, he was very explicit up front. He wanted to get rid of the whole thing. And it was basically 100% rock and roll that he had picked out. And I was like, all right, well, I'm very curious, especially based on some of those artists that he said he had. I went and met with him. Super nice guy. And he was very upfront with me. Like I said, he told me where he bought them, like I mentioned. And I could tell that he cared for it over the years, and it showed. So that was the first thing I noticed right off the bat, before I even started looking at any of the records, was just, as far as like specific titles, was just the condition. It was interesting because none of them were sleeved, as far as like clear outer sleeves. So none of them were necessarily protected, and they were on just generic wood shelves. But they were all in really good condition. There was not a lot, just in spot checking. I couldn't see a bunch of damaged records. Like you can tell corners are rounded and all that. So right off the bat, looked really good. I spoke with him for just a few minutes while my son was looking through the records, and I told him, hey, just look at condition, like pull them out randomly, pull out any good titles you see, check the actual records. So Ben was doing that for me, which was awesome, while I was speaking with him. The other thing that he mentioned early on was, or he had asked me kind of before I got there, is like, how much time do you think you're going to need? And of course, I could have gone in there and spent 5 hours and looked through every record, but that's not real reasonable. Most people don't want a stranger in their house looking at their stuff for a number of hours. So you don't have the ability to go in most of the time when you're buying a large collection and spend a whole day looking at it, which is how long it would have taken to look at, close to 3,000 records. And so I told him, I said, hey man, give me 30 minutes, give me an hour. And he said, that sounds reasonable. And I could tell that, that was, a concern for him, as far as just having someone in his home, which I completely understand. And so point being, I was able to look at condition. I was able to spot check just by looking at the spines and pulling in a few records and basically determine, okay, this is something I'm definitely interested in. I did not know at that point that there was any amount of rare records, super valuable records. I saw there were great titles. I saw and confirmed what he told me via email, which was essentially, hey, I went and looked at those key artists I already named, make sure, Beatles and Pink Floyd and Grateful Dead and David Bowie. And then while I was looking at those, I noticed some other artists. I was like, oh, that's pretty cool. And it just gave me validation that, okay, what he told me is true. And what he also said about the condition was true, because he kind of looked through that. So I was I wasn't there more than 30 minutes, which is crazy because it's a lot of records. And in hindsight, immediately after and prior to me actually acquiring them, I was like, oh man, maybe I need to spend more time. And I eventually did the next day when I went back. But again, this is a huge shelf, not too different than what you're looking at behind me of my own collection of a couple thousand records. And so the time that it takes to go through those is not quick. But we came to an agreement, and I said, hey, here's the deal. You've got a couple options, and you already told me you didn't want anybody to cherry pick this, which rightfully so, because if you want to make a lot more money, you can, have people come in and just pick out a few at a time. And you got lots of people coming in your house. You've got a lot of communication to deal with of, hey, when can you come? And hey, when can you come see this? And he didn't want anything to do with that, which I understand. It's a lot of work if you're going to sell a collection of 3,000 records and you're going to let buyers come in and look through it over time. You're talking about tons of communication. You're talking about, 10, 20, 50, 100 people coming through until he can move all this. And then again, he's still going to be stuck with a lot of records that are the less desirable ones. Even in a great collection, any collection, you're going to have common records. Could be great titles and it's great albums that are very common. And so again, he wasn't looking at it like that, which I understood. And so I told him, I said, I know you don't want that. I know you don't want all these people running through here, which means you want to sell it all. So it's got to be a bulk price, right? That's the agreement we came to. I'm not going to tell you what I paid for it, no. But we came to a very reasonable agreement based on what I had seen in a short amount of time, which again, I had 30, 45 minutes at looking at this, the initial time I met him, and then we kind of came to an agreement, and I came back the next day to actually take it home. So that's where it got exciting for me, because as we're loading these up, I'm actually taking them and putting them in boxes. It ended up being about 30 boxes. The boxes fit somewhere between 70, 80 LPs a piece, typically, depending if there's box sets and gatefolds and all that. But as we're kind of boxing it up, again, we had already agreed. We hadn't handshaked because it's COVID, but we had fist bumped, and I had paid the man his cash, and then we're loading them up. And as we're loading them up, of course, I'm kind of looking at them as we go, because again, I haven't seen the records that much. Again, I just kind of spot check, and that's when I started to realize that, oh man, there's maybe more here than I thought. Like, I kind of thought, hey, this is going to be a great classic rock collection. Most of the discography, so again, if I picked out a particular artist, like Pink Floyd, for instance, is one of the ones I always check for because they're very collectible and I love the band. And so it wasn't just like, oh, we had a couple of Pink Floyd albums. Like, he had the entire discography of Pink Floyd, and then you had the entire discography of David Bowie and the entire discography of the Beatles, etc. And so for me, that was enough right there, because that's some great stuff. But it was way beyond that. Like, I kind of anticipated that's what I got. And as I'm packing them up, I'm seeing some more stuff. I'm seeing some, a lot more new wave, a lot more punk, and a lot more kind of more obscure titles, obscure artists. And I was talking to him along the way because I was seeing these things. I was like, wow, I can't believe you have this. And he's like, oh yeah. And so the more I talked to him and the more I kind of saw it, as I was loading it, the more excited I was getting, just because I was seeing stuff I didn't expect. I was seeing stuff like White Zombie, which was not in the realm of what we had discussed necessarily. But again, he didn't have a list. He didn't have these cataloged anywhere. He just had them all they were all in alphabetical order. So that was awesome. So again, we pulled them all into boxes, got them all packed up. Along the way, I was seeing some albums and some artists that I was like, man, if he's got White Zombie, well, what else does he have, right? Like you can imagine if anyone's gonna buy a White Zombie record, you can imagine what else they would buy. And that could be said for some of the punk stuff, some of the new wave stuff, across the board, right? So we packed it all up. I had to rent a U-Haul, loaded it all in the U-Haul, got it into the storage space, unloaded it all in there. So then there you go. I've got 30 boxes of records, and I've posted pictures of what that is because they're still there right now. I still haven't gone through them very much at all. And that's when it was like, okay, now we've got them all here. Let's actually flip through all these records. So me and a buddy who helps me out, as well as my son Ben, we started flipping through the records, and that's when it got fun. Because that's when, again, they were all in alphabetical order. So we labeled all the boxes. So there was, A through Z in order in my storage space. And we just kind of started making our rounds, looking through all of them. And that's when I was pulling out stuff that I couldn't believe. We were like just artists that I didn't expect. Again, I was expecting this to be really heavy on the classic rock side, which it is. But there was a large portion of other genres, sub-rock genres that I've already mentioned, punk, metal, new wave, that type of stuff that I just did not expect. And to be honest, there's still so much that I haven't even dug into. I haven't even really hit the tip of the iceberg. So I've got some records to show. This is, again, kind of a first pass. I pulled out 1 or 2 crates of just like really interesting stuff, and I've showed photos of some of those leading up to this. The majority of the stuff I've got here, again, is just kind of a sampling. It's definitely some of the cooler, more unique stuff. So don't get me wrong, there's not 29 more boxes like this crate, but there's probably another couple crates like this for sure. And then especially as you get even to this is some of the more rare and collectible stuff, but even some of the mid-level stuff is just really, really good and stuff that you don't see a lot. So all in all, incredibly smooth deal. I haven't been buying large collections that long, a couple of years now. This is definitely one of the more unique ones. It was definitely one of the better deals where he was just a super nice guy and he appreciated. And I kept telling him, because he was like, I'm so happy that I'm getting rid of all these, but at the same time, I'm so sad because I collected these for so long. And I just reassured him. I said, look, the thing you got to remember is all this. He didn't even have a turntable anymore. Like, keep this, it's not like he was listening to these anymore. He enjoyed collecting them over the years, but he just had gone past that point. They were up in a room which wasn't very accessible for him to sit around and listen to. And again, he had other collections to deal with. So I just kept reassuring him that, hey, you've got so much great music here. And I didn't even know how much great music at that point, but even from what I had seen, that by passing this along through me and then through all of you, whoever this stuff ends up with, like, so much more joy is going to come from this music, letting people experience it, letting people add it to their collections, and they're going to pass it on. So, which is a real thing. Like, I say that, of course, because I want to make him feel okay about selling it to me, of course. But I legitimately believe that whenever I buy anything from anyone, I'm like, hey, you're doing the right thing, because a lot of people take this stuff to the dumpster. I ain't lying. I've been told many times, or they just take it to, not that it's a bad thing, but they could take it to a Half Price Books or a much larger record store, and they'll pay them pennies typically. And so I have the luxury of typically paying a little more than larger stores because I don't have as much overhead. I don't have a standalone location. I don't have employees and utilities and insurance and all this stuff. So that sometimes works in my favor. But I do have a customer base and I do have an outlet to move it all, which is a little different than a personal collector. So if I was just a personal collector, would I be able to go purchase a record collection of 3,000 albums? No, I probably wouldn't, because that's thousands and thousands of dollars. And the space and the time it takes to actually acquire it and work with it over time, you got to keep in mind it's going to take months to price all this stuff. First off, I've got a catalog. Luckily, it was in alphabetical order, so that helps. But I've got to inventory it all. I've got to re-sleeve it if it needs to be re-sleeved. Luckily, most of this is in good condition. It doesn't. But then I've got to grade it. I've got to put it in an outer sleeve. I've got to price it. all that takes so much time. And so that's the investment as a business owner that I'm making in this collection, in addition to the monetary investment I made. Where again, if I was a personal collector, like I'm just looking at like, hey, I'm looking at of owning it myself, and that's really overwhelming if you're talking about this many records, just from a sheer storage and investment standpoint. And so all in all, an incredible collection. I can't wait to roll this out into the shop. I can't guarantee you every single album in here is going to make it in the shop, but there's a vast majority are. And it's going to take time, though. That's the thing is, again, I don't have a big staff of people pricing records for me. So, and it takes time to price records. I look at every one of them. Especially if they're going to be priced, $10 or $15 above. I'm expecting every record. I'm making sure looking at the correct pressing to make sure I'm pricing it accordingly based on condition and based on the year and all of those things, right? And so that's going to take weeks and that's going to take months to roll this out. So I wish I could get it all priced and have one big, huge event where it's like the whole collection is there. That's just not the reality of it. That's not the reality of my business. So it's going to roll out over time. So you're going to see a crate here or there over the next several months rolled out. And like I always do, I'm going to advertise it and let you know what's coming as best I can for the most part. So, but let me show you some of the records. So again, this is just a sampling, it's several thousand records. So I just pulled out some of the cooler stuff. I just showed these. There's some stuff like this. So there's some cool 90s stuff, which again was really unexpected. Late 80s, early 90s. So you got some White Zombie stuff, which is really cool. Not stuff that you see. These are from, this is 89. This is a Canada one. So the other thing that was cool, which he told me, and which I started to notice, is there's a ton of promos. So there's a lot of gold stamp promos, even some white label promos. And as I was talking to him, I learned that, he did have some friends locally in Dallas who worked in radio. And at the time when I was talking to him, oh, that's cool. And he said that, he had acquired some in that way. And the more I've gone through it, I've started to realize what he was talking about, because there's a good number of promos. So you've got some stuff like Red Hot Chili Peppers, some of their earlier records and singles. There was also a lot of 12-inch singles, and so he collected not only the full lengths, but he would get a lot of the 12-inch singles for especially a lot of the new wave and kind of punk and stuff like that. And then you've got more metal, so you've got some really nice original Metallicas. This is the Creeping Death single, and then you've got Ride the Lightning. This one's got a little bit of a, I'm not sure what that is, a little bit of just warping on the jacket, but the record itself is phenomenal. And this is an original Megaforce white label promo. So really, really cool to see that. I was not expecting to see a white label promo when I opened Ride the Lightning, but super exciting. So that's one where, again, I don't know if that's going to make it into the shop or not, just because it's such a high value record, but it'll certainly make its way for sale somehow, I suspect. Skid Row, Poison, got a couple Motley Crue. So again, this is the type of stuff. These are all original pressings. Once I saw, I think the first thing I saw was one of the Metallica records. It wasn't Ride the Lightning, but I saw one of them, and that's what was like, oh man, if he's got early Metallica stuff, then he's potentially got a lot of really good stuff. But then it just got more interesting and more interesting. So you've got Butthole Surfers, which I'm like, okay, that's really cool. He's getting more into late 80s, early 90s, different genres even than metal. Then you've got punk stuff like the Circle Jerks, which is really cool. Captain Beefheart, so just the guy collected everything underneath the rock umbrella, and he collected all of the right bands. You've got Dead Kennedys, let's see what else. You've got Dead Milkmen, you've got Black Flag, just really, really cool taste. You've got some really cool Clash LPs, you've got Revolting Cocks, look at that. I mean, just crazy, like Front Two Vertu, like you just don't ever see that stuff, right? Devo, bunch of really cool, again, punk and new wave, and just here's a whole set of original Kraftwerk LPs, all in really, really nice shape. So I can't stress enough how varied and how on point his taste was. This is the Electric Prunes, camper van Beethoven. So he knew what he was looking for. He knew what he was doing when he collected this stuff over the years. KMFDM, just great stuff. But then it gets, then there's more, a couple classic rocks. You got King, he had a ton of King Crimson, Judas Priest. There was some Maiden in there. Love and Rockets. Here's a couple of the 12-inch singles. So NXS 12-inch singles for Devil Inside and New Sensation. Those are really cool. This is a really cool record I hadn't seen. Peter Gabriel. This is the instrumental music for The Last Temptation of Christ, a film by Martin Scorsese. So I thought that was really cool. I don't even know if that's super rare, but again, gold stamp promo on tons of these, which is awesome. Awesome to see. Lots of Brian Eno, Talking Heads, David Byrne, like lots of stuff like that for sure. Really cool. Lords of Acid, like again, like did not expect to see that. Really cool stuff. Here's a cool Kiss LP. You don't see, this is Hot in the Shade, pretty rare Kiss album. I think this is from the early 90s even, 89, so it's close. Again, one of the more rare. But then you've got, stuff like Kiss Alive, and this is just a really clean copy of Kiss Alive, which is why I stuck it in here. One of the cleaner copies I've seen, so that's really nice. Gold stamp promo, I think this Husker Du. So again, late 80s stuff. Enya, not one you see that often. What else do we have here? This is Masters of Reality. Back to some metal, Corrosion of Conformity. You've got Queensryche. Let's see. Oh, this is cool. Public Image. Bauhaus. Agent Orange. Psychedelic Furs. So you get the idea. Just some really, really unique stuff. Not stuff I have personally seen in a lot of bulk collections. A lot of these albums, you can find them. Obviously, you can search around Discogs, eBay, and even in some local shops. But to get a collection that is this unique and this curated is just really, really exciting. I can't wait to share it with everybody. But again, bear with me. It's going to take me some time. You don't need to bother messaging me or commenting on this saying, how much is this one? How much is that one? These aren't priced yet. It's going to take me time to get through not only this crate, but the other 29 boxes. I'm excited to do it. So bear with me. And again, if you follow the NTX Vinyl, which is probably how you're watching this, or if you're in the Now Spinning group where I show a lot of stuff off as well, I will absolutely advertise when this stuff is coming out into the shop the best I can. But again, it's a lot of records, so I'm going to get them out as fast as I can over the next couple weeks and months. Feel free to let me know what you're looking for, but again, I don't have prices and I'm not going to like hold specific albums at this point because again, I haven't even gone through the majority of it. It'll take many, many passes to go through and start pulling out different genres and separating. That's probably my first step, is to, even though they're all alphabetized right now, I've got to go in and extract all the different genres. So I need to take all the new wave out and keep that in a section. I need to take all of the punk out and put that in a section. And then I've got the classic rock stuff. There's a little bit of R&B. I remember seeing a whole collection of Prince. So just, again, the guy had great taste. It aligns really, really nicely with my taste, and I think with my audience at NTX, all of you guys, which is exciting. And so just super excited to be able to bring this to you. Thanks for watching. Feel free to give me feedback on this. But again, you can't buy any albums right now, but we're getting close. Just give me some time. We'll get there. Super exciting. I love seeing this stuff. I love seeing it out in the wild. It gives me hope, and it should give you hope that there are a lot of records still out there. There were a lot of records sold throughout 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. Obviously the new stuff is great, but if you're into the vintage stuff, don't give up hope. It's out there. It'll come in the form of guys like this who are wanting to pass it along to new collectors and to new ears, so that it can continue to get experienced. So that's all I got on the new collection. If you do have any specific questions that I didn't kind of touch on as far as how I came across this or how this or that works, like I'm happy to answer to a certain extent. I love kind of passing this along and sharing this knowledge, because I think it's exciting. I know if I was a record collector, or should say, prior to being a record store owner, when I was primarily a record collector, I would have eaten this up and loved to have learned like how these things come about And so that's my whole thing when I think about, should I do a video and show people, talk about this? I'm like, yes, because if I put myself in your shoes, this is really interesting. And even over here, to me, it's still really interesting just to be able to see this much, to see this quality of vintage LPs from these eras still making their way around. So thanks for watching. I'll catch up with you guys soon. I'll have another video next week. And I hope you keep tuning in. Really appreciate all the support. We'll talk soon.